Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Haven't told this one in a while. Not me, but a nurse I worked with. Omaha or Lincoln, 1990s. First of many waves of crystal meth epidemic hitting the city. Guy was brought to the hospital with all the classic symptoms. Doesn't fit the stereotype user though. Wearing a suit, well-groomed. Guy is losing his mind when the cops bring him in, trying everything he can think of to get loose, screaming like a madman. As soon as cops leave the room, he calms down. Local PD don't have a great reputation, and this wasn't long after the whole LA riots ordeal, so nurses just assumed cops were mistreating him. Guy goes from shouting to kind of chanting to just talking in a regular voice, but in gibberish. A couple of Pentecostal nurses think he's speaking in tongues. Resident is called down to assess. Pretty sure at this point whatever it is isn't meth. Resident is from Saudi Arabia. He starts listening to the patient talking before he gets to the room. Stops in his tracks, listens in for a few seconds, then nopes back to his office. Nurse telling the story goes to his office and tells him to get his shit together and go assess like he's supposed to. Resident tells her there's no way in hell he's going near that guy. Nurse asks why not. Resident explains that the guy isn't speaking in tongues. He's speaking perfectly fluent Arabic. Trouble is, he's very clearly talking to a demon. Guy starts bellowing like an ox again, loud enough to be heard in the office. Patient switches between this and very calmly, matter-of-factly, telling nurses and other patients, "I'm going to eat your eyes." Eventually put into a padded room for patient safety. Every time somebody goes into the room to give him food or check on him, he fights like a cornered animal. Comes out of it the next day. Super nice to everybody. Has no recollection of anything that happened to him for the past couple days. Guy doesn't speak a word of any other language besides English.
My wife and I were taking a late-night stroll through a wooded area near our home in Omaha, Nebraska. This was back in the late fall of 2018. We know the area well and have frequented the grove many times. As we approached the wooded area, we could see lights from the houses beyond the grove shining through the trees. As we approached, we noticed there appeared to be shadows darting through the trees. We immediately thought there were children playing around down there. We decided to go and check it out and possibly to scare the kids for fun. We got close to the trees and realized there were no children in the grove of trees. No one could be seen at all. We took a side entrance into the grove and walked into the trees, wondering if the shadows we saw simply came from the light from the houses in the distance. Like maybe our eyes were playing tricks on us. The grove was well lighted, as there was a lot of moonlight and virtually no leaves left on the trees. It was fairly cold. It happened before the first snowfall, and dead leaves littered the ground. As we walked holding hands into the grove, we abruptly heard a footfall in the leaves. At that time, the unknown entity crossed our path. It moved in glimpses as if under a strobe light, only no light was given off. As it crossed our path, it was visible one moment and then gone the next. This alternated as it strode in front of us. It smiled at us and appeared to be waving. I wasn't prepared for this, and seeing it froze me in fear. The entity was a biped that stood taller than me at 5'10". It was completely naked, though no genitalia could be seen. Where human genitals should have been, there appeared to be nothing there, as you would imagine a doll would look. Its skin was a dark grayish color. It had very small black eyes which reflected the moonlight. Its ears were tight against its head. The ears came to a point. The jaw was bigger than any human's. The jawline went all the way up the sides of its head as if its smile stared behind its ears. Rows of sharp white teeth were visible as it smiled at us. It had slits for a nose that were slightly flared at the top. I can't remember how many fingers it had, but it definitely had digits that it held up as it waved. The encounter lasted all but a few minutes. The instant I was able, I twisted my wife's arm and I grabbed hold of her wrist. I'm twice my wife's size with a very athletic build. I ran at top speed, literally dragging her in the dirt, through the leaves out of the grove, up the grass hill, through the soccer field, and into the street. As we reached the street, I noticed my wife was yelling and screaming at me to stop and go back. "Go back," she said. as she badly wanted to make contact with the entity. But my fear overpowered me, and I dragged us both into the house. From our doorstep, we could see the grove of trees. I immediately said, "Don't say anything," as I didn't want our testimonials to become tainted with any kind of suggestion from one another. I separated us into different rooms and had us write down our testimonials of what we saw. To no surprise, we both described the same entity with the same features. This event has affected my life very negatively, as my family thinks my wife and I made it up or are just plain lying to get attention or something. Not knowing what this entity was keeping me up many nights. I must have thought about every possibility. I thought it could have been a spirit, a human in Hollywood-style movie makeup, maybe a Scooby-Doo type hologram projector, or even an alien. To this day, not knowing eats at the back of my mind. I fully know aliens exist. With the vastness of space and the countless stars in the universe, it becomes clear that we cannot possibly be the only life. Even now, I can feel my heart racing as I recall the event. Did I miss out on a 1 in a billion chance to possibly communicate with another intelligent life form? I only have one regret in my life, and that regret is not going back to find out for sure what it was. If we are ever going to communicate with beings like this, if indeed it was one, we need to have love at the center of our awareness, so we don't flee in fear for no reason. For a long time, I never told anyone but my closest friends and my immediate family for fear that people would think we were crazy. But it's come to a point that this itch in the back of my brain has gotten so bad I feel it necessary to tell others of what we saw. I've become so obsessed with searching the web for possible information on the existence of alien life that I often spend hours of my time sifting through garbage on the internet just trying to find someone somewhere who has seen an entity like the one we saw. I am not crazy.
My dad was a psych student in Omaha in the late 70s and early 80s. He worked at an emergency room. 18-year-old kid at an ER. Funny, right? Didn't really need to be qualified then. And a woman there brought a Ouija board in during one of his night shifts. He was a hardcore atheist, science-minded guy at that age. Went up there to see the Ouija board, didn't think it would do anything. Woman who had it, who he'd never met, spelled out Uncle Leo and love, love, love. Uncle Leo was his uncle who had died about 5 weeks prior and who he was very close to. It also spelled out his cousin's name, Francis, and pregnant, boy, Matt, then ended with love, love, love. Francis' wife was 8 months pregnant, and their baby boy was named Matt. Needless to say, my father was a bit jarred by it.
I had a major religious experience in Omaha in May of 2022, and I'd like to finally talk about it. Anyone notice anything weird going on at the time? I talked to some cops, noticed a lot of supernatural events occurring at the time, and believe I was followed by some glowies. I can answer questions and provide evidence, but nothing too general. I just want to get the story out there. OP here, for those of you who are curious. I can tell you the start of the story. A friend and I were drinking, and he brought out one of those gum cube containers full of old mushrooms, and we split the whole thing. We were drinking too and smoking pot, so within an hour or so I'd forgotten I took the mushrooms. Well, my dad was closing a bar in Benson called the Nifty, and I headed up there to pick him up, not feeling too fucked up at all. Something came over me while I was there, though. A group of police officers came in and asked for some security footage, and I danced around them and joked that I had had a beer with my friend, even though I was 19. I asked if they were going to arrest me. They got visibly nervous and left the bar. Later, I cornered a fella who was kind of drunk and asked if he wanted to know the meaning of life, telling him I could reveal the secret for $20. He asked if I was on mushrooms or something, and I said no, because I had forgotten by this point about taking them. He told me he didn't believe me and fucked off inside. By this point, the bartender, my dad, was blackout drunk and stumbling behind the bar. I knew I had to do something as he wasn't fit to work anymore, so I stood behind the bar and asked if I could help the customers, the family of the same guy I had accosted earlier. We started arguing. They told me I was too young to work behind the bar and told me I didn't even work there. I just messed with them, smiling as someone on mushrooms does, and fucking with them. It escalated to them screaming at me that they'd call the police. As they screamed, A light bulb above the bar exploded, and my dad knocked over a glass, shattering it on the floor. The people in the bar started freaking out. I came out from behind the bar as the family was freaking out and patted the same guy on the back. I asked him if I had blown his mind. He suddenly got this faraway look in his eye, ran to the bathroom and started throwing up. Screaming and yelling in the bathroom. The family left, and I drove my dad home. I told him he was a holy man and that God would guide us as we went home. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned for hours while my mind raced. When I finally got to sleep, I dreamt of the apocalypse. I remember a few images from it. The ocean was red with blood. I was in California or something and walked into a gas station. I started looting. The clerk behind the counter yelled at me, telling me he was going to call the police, and I looked at him and said, "Are you crazy? Go home to your family." There were no cars on the highway except for some sports cars going faster than I thought possible. Bodies washed up on the shore, and I searched desperately for my family. That was the first night. When I woke up, I remembered what I dreamt and wrote a poem about it in the bathtub. Then I decided to go downtown and busk for a little while with my guitar. I'd never busked before, and I don't know why the impulse grabbed me so suddenly. I busked at the candy store, got kicked out after having a heart-to-heart conversation with the owner about making it. Then I met a few homeless people sitting on the gas station corner and chatted with them for a while. There were 3 of them in particular that I grew close to that morning. The only name I remember from them was Sam. Sam was a bigger lady, very nice, younger, but had obviously been homeless for a while. She came off to me like a drifter of sorts, who was stuck in Omaha. I'd always thought of Omaha as the bottom of the bowl of this country, where the rejected pieces fell to and stayed until they found a hand to pick them up. The other 2 homeless folks I was with were a woman who used crutches because of her infected foot and a wheelchair-bound meth smoker. Anywho, I rendezvoused with them at the gas station and had the urge to take them to the church across the street. The woman with the crutches wouldn't go in because the church was notorious for taking homeless folks directly to the shelter, so I went down while the other 2 waited outside. While I was there, the pastor was giving a sermon about how true Christians won't always look how you'd expect them to look. I looked at the guy next to me with a big grin on my face. He was your standard Creighton student, rich, preppy, conservative-looking Jesuit. But as I looked at him, he got visibly nervous, dropped his jaw, and looked back and forth between the pastor and me. When the sermon was done, I asked if I could bring my homeless friends in for the free lunch. The Jesuit next to me grinned, wide-eyed, and said, "You can have whatever you want." The church was in the basement of a big building, so me and Sam had to first carry the wheelchair down, then the gentleman. We got our salads and sat on the couch talking amongst ourselves, while people came up to us and asked us questions. The wheelchair man came to me and asked if I could get him some money. I asked the Jesuit from earlier if he had $10 for my friend there, and he said he had no cash on him, but he was sure anybody else would love to help me out. I took one of the pieces of art made by the homeless man and went table to table trying to sell it. As I write this, I am reminded of the story of Jesus flipping the merchant's table in the church. Okay, so we left the church, me, Sam, and the wheelchair-bound man, and I remembered that I was supposed to go to my step-grandpa's funeral. I pulled up to my second church of the day, the funeral home, in a Hawaiian t-shirt and sweatpants. My parents were pissed that I had showed up in that fashion, with 2 homeless people in the backseat of my car, but were happy I was there. It was a sweet moment. Afterwards, I had to drop off the wheelchair-bound man because he needed to buy some meth, so Sam and I were left alone to hang out for a while. We went to my house and I made us a few sandwiches, and we decided to walk to my local corner store to grab some candy and a soda. We noticed there were a lot more cars on the street in my tiny neighborhood than usual, but didn't think too much of it. Later, while we were in my living room watching music videos, I saw on my friend's Instagram story him going into the same corner store we had went to earlier as he worked across the street, with a line out the door full of people who looked a lot like the Jesuits I had run into at the church earlier. I remember distinctly from the story a girl with a Creighton shirt, grinning, as if she were happy just to be where I had been. I showed Sam, and she started freaking out, asking if this was real. I told her I thought it was. I said we ought to get out of here, so we got back in my car. Me, being a broke college student, and her being a homeless woman, had no money amongst the two of us. But we wanted cigarettes, so we drove all the way across town to the bookstore to sell some books. I'm gonna skip ahead here for time's sake, and because nothing much of interest happened, yada yada yada, we get cigarettes, ask people for money, get some money. Okay, so now we're in Council Bluffs at the Applebee's trying to get a dinner for both of us with the least amount of money. We ask the bartender if she has any food left over for us, and she, out of nowhere, starts screaming at us. You need to leave. You're just going around scamming people. It's not right what you're doing. As if she had already heard about us, I get pissed and reach into my pocket, where I find 2 pennies. Oh yeah? I asked. Here's my 2 cents. Fucking stupid, I know. But the guy at the bar starts dying laughing and going, yeah, show her. We leave. Sam said she needs to drop off, so she texts someone from my home and tells me to drop her off at a gas station by my house. Oh well, I go home and start watching The Forever Purge, which inexplicably starred an Omaha native, one I saw IRL quite often, as the president. I knew the night wasn't over for me. Around midnight, I drove across town, again, to Aksarben, and this is where things started to freak me out a bit. I was pretty paranoid and felt pretty important, though the nature of my importance was a bit of a mystery to me. So I pull up across the park in Aksarben, right next to the movie theater, and walk over and sit on a bench in front of the Voodoo Taco. A car pulls up right in front of me, a young Latino man and his girlfriend. At first I think they're there to make out or something, but the girl rolls her window down and is leaning her head almost on the window of her car, facing me, not the guy she's with. I walk up to the car and manically ask, "Do you need me? Are you looking for me?" The guy looks a bit nervous and asks something like, "You good, bro?" I realize I'm freaking them out and changing my demeanor entirely. I shift into the Midwestern sweetheart accent and say, "Well, if y'all or anyone needs to talk to me, let me know," and give him a big smile. He looks more freaked out than he did before and speeds off. It's worth noting here that while the girl was leaning toward me, her arm was up out the window, as if she were holding a microphone. I waited there in Aksarben for a while. I approached a street sweeper who was sweeping the street right in front of me and asked if he had a cigarette. "Not at this time," he said. "Who talks like that?" Then I got a text message. "Baby, I hear the helicopters. Meet me at the Quick Trip." I got this text on my flip phone and couldn't really believe what I was seeing. There was a Quick Trip just up the street, but there was also one on the way to my house, about 3 miles away. I decided to go there on foot, leaving my car in Aksarben. As I walked, cars sped by me. I flashed them, lifting up my shirt and pulling down my pants to show them I didn't have any weapons on me. I left my phone, wallet, and keys in the handle of a dumpster outside my favorite vape shop, a couple of stores down from the Quick Trip. When I arrived, the parking lot was full, even though I was sure the Quick Trip closed at 11. As I approached the pumps, I picked up a glass liquor bottle I found on the ground and spiked it to announce my presence. It didn't break. I approached a woman in a car and tried the door handle, as I thought she was the one I was supposed to talk to. She shook her head calmly, as if she didn't see me as a threat. I went around the back of the Quick Trip, went all the way around and came back to the front from the other side. At this point, 2 police officers approached me. "I heard you've been trying people's door handles?" One of the pigs asks. "Are you the guys I'm supposed to talk to?" "Yeah, that's us, yeah." I got into the back of the car. I joked with the police officers for a minute, saying, "I got a 98 on my ASVAB, by the way." One of them laughed. "I only got a 75. "I got like an 80, the other said. "I'm not CIA, I told them, and they stopped laughing. I then heard, clear as day, the first religious aspect of this story, clear as day. It was a woman's voice coming through on the driver's radio. "God's real," she said. The police began to drive me home, nervously making conversation. "You ever been to California Taco?" he asked. "A taco shop in Midtown." "Yeah, that place sucks," I said. "Oh, I heard it was pretty good," he said. California Taco is known as a kind of sketchy spot in Omaha. It's rumored that the owner was a criminal in Miami and moved to Omaha and opened the restaurant after informing on some people over there. He was actually on an episode of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, despite the food being terrible. The restaurant was pretty overpriced, despite being in a lower-income neighborhood. and the owner was a known crackhead. Anyway, they drove me home, and I had another pretty restless night. The next day I woke up and decided to walk to the store I worked at down the street.
Wow, you're a real piece of shit.
I was acting really weird at work concerning my coworkers and kind of freaking out the customers. I went on my lunch break and walked down to a burger joint where I asked the people sitting at the tables for some money to buy some lunch. Eventually, a nice lady gave me $5. I went up to the counter and asked, "What can I buy with $5? "A burger," the clerk said. "How about with $10? And then I ripped the 5 in two. A guy at the table in front of the register said, I'd have beat his ass if I gave him money. I sat over at the table for a while watching the TV, reflecting on how good television was for wasting time. Then, when I saw a particularly good-sized order, I went up to the guy handing it out, gave him the ripped-up 5, and told him I wanted him to share the meal with the people in the restaurant. I look at this part and cringe, but at the time I genuinely thought I was making people happy and helping out. I walked back to work and found out that I'd been gone for an hour and a half an hour longer than I was supposed to go out. I cashiered for a while, cut the letter A into my hand with a box cutter, and walked out of the store with my radio still on me. I approached a young woman across the street sitting outside a pizza shop, looking sad, and asked if there was anything I could do for her. She said something like, "Fuck off," but I told her I was there for her. I walked back home and lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, laughing. After a while, my dad comes into the room, crying, telling me he's going to take me to the hospital. "Okay," I said, and giggled. I didn't really realize what was happening. Anyway, I guess I'll keep going. I go into the hospital and am held in a room for like hours. I occasionally get up and ask when I'm going to be moved to somewhere else because I was just sitting there, drifting in and out of sleep, no one telling me anything. Eventually, I get taken down into what feels like the catacombs of the hospital and get put in a room with 2 doctors who interrogate me to figure out what the hell had happened. "Is this room hot?" I ask. The male doctor laughs and says, "I haven't heard that one for a while." I relaxed a little and told him what I had just told you. I'm then put on a 72-hour hold filled with paranoia, fear, and delusion. I do a lot of praying and a lot of writing. A meth head in the ward looks at me and tells me he can see evil in my eyes. It scares me. Later, I got out. My mom drives in from out of town and takes me on a trip into Colorado to help her move across the west to New Mexico. I notice cars following us, etc. Weird times. When I get back to Omaha, I tell my friends what happened early one morning before they go into work. They start getting paranoid along with me, and we go into the repair shop they work at to get our minds off things. Before the shop is open, we get a knock on the door. It's 2 employees from California Taco, one of them, the older sister of a friend I hadn't seen in a while. The 2 girls had just gotten fired at around 9 o'clock that morning and needed to use the shop Wi-Fi. They set up their computers inside and connected to the Wi-Fi, talking to my friends. I wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention, but I occasionally heard them laughing about things like invisible ink and spitting in someone's coffee, speaking euphemistically, of course. Me and my friend, the one who had shot the video in the corner store, went into the back of the shop and dug through a box, finding a walkie-talkie that was on and recording. "Is this yours?" I asked him. "Yeah, but it doesn't work." I pressed the button and it made a noise like a walkie-talkie commencing a transmission. At first, my friends were skeptical about the whole being followed thing. But after that day, they started listening to me, started telling me about weird things that they had noticed, which were in line with what I had experienced. There was another night, a week or so later, where I was convinced I was being followed. I had planned to walk to my house to the big park in the center of town, which was a few miles away, get up in a tree and see if I could speak with Jesus Christ. I noticed again cars following me on my way, so I ducked into the trees and went down into the storm drain that I explored regularly as a kid. This is the religious experience I alluded to earlier. I spoke into the utter darkness of the storm drain, not seeing anything, and said, "Lord, whenever you're ready." In the darkness, I heard a stone drop and splash in the water, as if someone were standing in the drain and dropped the rock for me to hear. Okay, but one last thing. Later, I mentioned this all to my friend, whose sister was the one who was fired from California Taco, and she asked if I had been on drugs. I said, just weed, and she said, that's weird because my sister was talking that way when she was on meth. I never claimed to be insightful or to have the definitive answer for anything. I just wanted to share my story and see what people thought. No reason to call me a piece of shit.
Where are you now, physically and spiritually?
I've mellowed out quite a bit. This whole experience freaked me out for quite a while, and I kind of became a hermit for a year in a tiny one-bedroom apartment, but I'm working again, back in school, reading my Bible and going to church. I don't notice as much supernatural or paranoid or coincidental stuff, but this whole experience really affirmed my faith.
Sounds like all the mushrooms you took caused a schizophrenic experience. Are you sure you even really got a text message, for example? Also, stop smoking weed because it causes psychosis in people prone to it. When you truly sober up, take some time to truly introspect your behaviors, then reread your posts and you will understand why the other anon called you that.
I've long since quit smoking weed. I realized a year or two ago that it was bad for me, that it made me lazy and impeded my creativity. I agree with you there, I just don't think it makes me a piece of shit for having had a hard time. I think so too. But the text message was still there when I got out of the hospital. I showed it to my dad, and he didn't have an explanation for it either. And when I got my wallet back, it had everything in it but my driver's license. Anyway, nothing like that has happened to me since, but I still think about it from time to time and wonder what was real and what was a product of delusion. I haven't taken shrooms since either. Not the kind of guy who can handle them.
I'm a military school teacher near Omaha, Nebraska, and one year we had a man from out of town come and take a position as a teacher. He was allegedly a Gulf War veteran and a doctor. I'll just call him Dr. Smith. Now, in a military school, in addition to many of the same classes you'd have in regular schooling, we also run drills like marching, rifle cleaning, mess cleaning, tending to the grounds, etc., thus making his credentials extraordinary. Our school rarely gets out-of-towners to apply, and almost none with Dr. Smith's experience. Since we're an on-facility school, meaning the students only go home for certain holidays or emergencies and the staff live on school property, many of the staff bring their significant others to live there during the school year. This man also brought what we initially believed to be his wife, but their relationship seemed to be more of a professor-intern type. Nobody really saw her much, but my friends would sometimes recall strange sightings where they'd see her duck off into a nearby cornfield at weird hours of the night. So the extraterrestrial part of the story kicks in now. So about a month or two into the school year, everything's normal. Dr. Smith is a competent teacher and great at leading some of the military exercises we run, and he was a nice guy, if not a little odd. He was always mentioning a great war while looking slightly confused as to what he was talking about. I just chalked it up to some form of PTSD. One day I was overseeing the pupils tending to the cornfield, one of their non-traditional school duties, when Dr. Smith's companion appeared out of nowhere from the field and came up to me and started asking very nervously, "What are you doing? How far into the field are you going? Have you seen Mr. Smith?" I'm a bit taken aback because before this encounter, I had only ever exchanged small hellos with this woman. I explain that my students are performing their duties and she just says one word, "Caution." She then runs off. I was more baffled by the fact that she was running everywhere, but I shrugged it and went back to overseeing the kids. A week later, I woke in the middle of the night to our school alarm. We have unannounced combat drills quite a bit, but usually the staff are pre-warned. I figured it was a troubled student performing a prank, but I jumped into action nonetheless. As I met up with other teachers, it's becoming clear that this might not be a drill or a prank at all. Nobody knows who pulled the alarm until Dr. Smith's companion comes running in, always running, and yells that we need to prepare the students for an invasion. Of course, we are all pissed that this crazy woman woke us all up, but she points to some scarecrows coming out of the cornfield. We realize that some of the students or some local kids must be playing a prank. So our principal goes out and tells the scarecrows to immediately leave and that they were on private property. They just all shouted they wanted Dr. Smith and they wouldn't harm us if we handed him to them. Now Dr. Smith was with us and claimed to have no idea what these people were or wanted. His companion keeps pleading with him, "We need to get you back. We need to get you back. You need to trust me." Then before I could hear any more of their conversation, all hell broke loose. Our principal rips off the bag from the head of the Scarecrow leader and it's just hay. Then a little confused, he grabs its arm and realizes it's all hay too and rips it off. Probably a midget hiding in the body. Nope. He takes apart the whole Scarecrow that we just watched walk out of a field and speak, and all he could find was hay and cloth. Now everyone's starting to get confused, and one of the other teachers quietly suggests that we should assemble the students for conflict. I'm still skeptical until one of the other Scarecrows walks over, puts his hand on the neck of our principal, and seriously injures him. Everyone starts freaking out, and in the chaos of us prepping for a fight, Dr. Smith and his companions sneak into the field without the Scarecrows noticing. They keep repeating to hand over Dr. Smith, and we won't have any further harm done to us. Amongst all the scrambling, we see a giant light in the middle of the cornfield shoot up into the sky for about 10 seconds and then disappear completely. I've tried to explain this many ways and can't. I went to the spot later on and didn't find any signs of lights or even damaged crops. The Scarecrows all start to head toward the light when Dr. Smith appears from the complete other end of the cornfield. Many people will say he just ran there, but there was no way he and his companion could get from where he entered to where he exited that fast, and without damaging any of the crops. Only it wasn't quite Dr. Smith. I mean, it looked like him, but something was different. He shined a small blue light. It looked like one of those keychain LED lights, but I was far away. And the Scarecrows all dropped. He turned to us and said that there wouldn't be any more trouble and that he was so sorry for the injury of our colleague and that he never meant to put us in any danger. He ran off into the cornfield again, always running, and none of us ever saw him again. We were still all too panicked and busy running the students into positions to truly process the sheer weirdness of what just happened. Now, in the hours that followed, I was ready to believe most reasonable explanations and aliens weren't reasonable in my book. It wasn't until morning when soldiers in uniform arrived claiming they were from an army task force, but not in any uniforms I had ever seen before, and asked us questions that I started putting the pieces together. They asked about things like, did you see anything unusual in the sky before and following Dr. Smith's arrival? Were there any words he mentioned that you didn't recognize? What was his companion like? Did you ever hear anything about his past? Did he always look the same, or did his appearance ever change? Random questions like that. Real Men in Black type stuff. I half expected to be brainwashed, but they just relocated all of the teachers to other schools and had us sign confidentiality agreements.
In June of 1977, two young brothers went exploring in a cave just outside of Omaha, Nebraska. The cave was rumored to be haunted, but this did not deter the boys from entering. They assured their mother they would be home in time for supper. Dinner sat on the table, and the mother began to worry. She waited for another 30 minutes and then ventured out to where the boys said they were going. A small stream flowed from the cave's entrance. The mother called into the cave for her boys, but was answered by her own voice echoing off the cave walls. She noticed a sneaker that belonged to the elder of her boys had washed out of the cave and was caught in some debris. She panicked and ran back to the house as fast as she could and dialed the police. By 11 p.m., the entire Omaha PD and fire department were on the scene. Local news stations had picked up the story and had sent crews out there to cover the events of that night. After a short while, a police sergeant radioed to the teams he sent into the cave, only to be answered with static. He ordered that the entire cave be lit up and for another task force to be sent in with high-wattage lamps to search the cave along with constant radio contact. 10 minutes passed, and the radio check-ins ceased. Gunshots rang out and echoed off the cave walls along with screams. It was unable to be determined how many shots were fired or who was screaming. Blood began running down the stream, and the sergeant radioed for the National Guard. This was the last the news crews were allowed on the scene. They were rushed off and a perimeter was set up. It has been reported that the elder brother was found curled up beside a wall near the entrance, shaking, crying, and covered in blood. He was later institutionalized after the investigation of what happened that night turned up no bodies. Since then, the cave has been searched and searched numerous times, never to return any physical evidence of the events that took place that night. The investigation was reopened 8 years later in September of 1985. The elder brother had not said or done anything since his institutionalization. One day, as a nurse was changing his sheets, he requested a black fountain pen and a sketchbook. He began drawing what appeared to be the entrance to the cave. The observing doctor immediately phoned the Nebraska Police Department and told them what was happening. The boy continued to draw pictures, almost as if he was writing the storyboard to a television show or commercial. The police requested that all drawings be confiscated upon completion for evidence. The drawings continued. He and his brother were walking through the cave, and then a drawing appeared that shocked all of those in attendance. The boy had drawn a room or a portion of the cave that no one who searched it ever reported finding. This room was much larger than the cave ever became, and appeared to have smooth walls with inscriptions etched into the rock. The boy continued drawing. The doctors noted he appeared to be more agitated and began to show signs of anxiety. His next drawing contained what appeared to be a third person in the room with the boys. As the drawings continued, the figure approached closer and closer. With each drawing, the boy became more and more agitated and was now crying. The doctors wanted to intervene, but the police threatened them with obstruction of justice charges if they didn't allow them to continue. The boy began convulsing as he was finishing his final drawing. He fell to the ground and appeared immobile. Doctors and nurses rushed to the boy's aid and he was rushed out of the room. The police retrieved his final drawing and saw that the boy had drawn the room they were standing in. The police were also in the picture, only they were on the ground, mangled, twisted, and bleeding, with one policeman standing over their bodies. The police thought it was some sort of sick joke and began arguing amongst themselves about what to do. None of them paused long enough to notice that there was a fourth policeman in the room with them.
Be me, summer 2015. Just started browsing /x/frequently. Stumble upon that photo with no text attached. Ask the anon for an explanation. He replies with something along the lines of, he's destroyed the well-being of a lot of families in the Omaha, Nebraska area, including my own. Kind of just assume that it's somebody posting some uncle that they don't like or something, but still curious, especially because I have some distant family that lives in Nebraska. Haven't talked to them in years, though. Reply to the anon and say, I have family in Nebraska. How has he destroyed lives there? He replies, I can't elaborate without sounding crazy, but please never let your family go near parks there. Actually, just have them move from Nebraska altogether. Now, I am kind of paranoid. I just assume that he's a Christian or something, so I try to do a reverse image search. 0 results. What the fuck.jpg? Kind of paranoid, but get ready for bed regardless because it was late and I had school the next day. Next day arrives. I ask one of my friends online if he can help me find the origin of a photo since he's always been more tech savvy than I have. He replies a few hours later with the name of a girl and her Facebook account, saying that she's the only place on the internet that this photo has ever been posted. Her account is still up today, but I'm not going to post it out of respect for her. She's already been through a lot. Go through her page. Blonde woman in her mid-20s. She's pretty, but clearly unhappy. You could tell that she had been through a fair bit of pain. Page is kind of barren. Can't find the photo of the old man. Assume that my friend just let me down a false pathway to fuck with me or something. Decide to message her. Start off by saying stuff like, hi, how are you? Very basic stuff. I only get one word replies back. She asks me, why do you want to talk to me? Say, I was wondering if you could tell me anything about this photo, and send her it. In hindsight, it was probably pretty shitty and insensitive of me to ask her that bluntly. But in my defense, I was a teenager, and I was still pretty positive I was just being trolled by my friend. She takes a few minutes to respond, which was weird, given that she was replying almost immediately before, eventually replies back with, I will contact the authorities if you don't tell me where you got that photo. Incredibly confused, I told her that I'm sorry and that I saw it get posted on an image board and that I was told that this man was dangerous. She doesn't respond. Basically start begging her, start saying things along the lines of, I have family in Nebraska, please tell me I need to keep them safe if there is something dangerous in Omaha. It was half the truth, and half a lie. Part of me was just being ate away by not knowing who this guy was, or what he did that supposedly ruined the life of this woman. After like 10 minutes, she finally responds. If you have family in Nebraska, you need to get them out now. I don't know where he is now, but he has been lurking in that area since I was a child. Ask her if she can please tell me what he did or is still doing. More nothing for like 10 minutes. She finally budges. It was a really long story, so I'm going to Greentext it instead of just copy-pasting it. Be her. Around middle school age, she had just got out of school. Living in Omaha at the time, her and her friends decide to go to the park after school. They walk there. Park is completely barren for some reason, even though school just got out less than 30 minutes ago. Her and her friends play for a while. Her friends, who were sisters, both leave to go eat dinner with their families. The main girl decides to stay for a little while extra since it was nice out. She notices a figure emerge seemingly from nowhere. She didn't see where he came from. He just sort of appeared in the middle of the park while she was on the swing. He was wearing a long coat, no hat or mask on, but she was still having trouble seeing his face. By the time she noticed how close he was getting, she tried to get up, but she said that she couldn't. Part of me is still confused by this part. She said that it felt like she was almost glued into the swing with fear, even though he hadn't really done anything yet. He gets up close to her. She's completely frozen with fear at this point. He gets up into her face. "My peanuts, wee nuts," is the only thing he said to her before walking away. Tears start seeping down her face. The man slowly walks back out of the park, seemingly fading into nothingness. As soon as he's gone, she starts sprinting out of the park, back home. That's where her story ends, but she describes to me that she was never the same afterwards, and that finding this man and his identity has been an obsession of hers since the day that it happened. Feel like I'm going to vomit at this point. A wave of dread like I had never felt before at this point in my life flushed over me. Can barely type on my computer. Don't even know what to say to her at this point. She explains to me that this photo, the one I posted, was the only trace of him that she's been able to find outside of her story, and she doesn't even know where it came from. She said that someone, I didn't think to ask, else messaged her that photo on Facebook years prior without any explanation, and wouldn't respond to her once she started asking questions. Just tell her thank you for letting me know, and then get ready to lay down shortly afterwards. I never contacted her again after that. But I also can't shake the idea that this guy is going to pop up somewhere around me now that I know so much about this story. It's almost a struggle for me to even leave the house every day. It's been 7 years and I still can't find any information about it. I want to tell my family, but they'll think I'm fucking nuts if I come to them with this.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.